Alright, so this is my first time using the software, so hopefully everything works right and you can see the screen. If you can't see the screen, I will also send the PowerPoints over so you can click through it. And just please bear with me a bit because it's a little bit awkward just presenting to a webcam. But anyway, here I'll go. Alright, so for my term project, I looked at using crash modification factors to evaluate roadway improvements in Dover, New Hampshire. Alright, so to just give a quick outline of my presentation, the first thing I will go through is the literature review, and then I'll work my way into the introduction, where I'll first give the background of where I got the idea to do this project and what my term project is based on. And then we'll look at the study area, and then I'll get into the details of the crash data, where I obtained the crash data from, and looking at the exact location of the crashes. And then finally, we'll look at the recommended improvement strategies for this section of roadway. And then I will move on to the analysis bit that I did. And the first part of that is I went onto the Crash Modifications Clearinghouse website and got crash modification factors. And then with those, I developed benefit to cost ratios, which I'll explain in detail later on in my slides. And then finally, I'm going to go through closing thoughts. The first part of that is what are the conclusions I came to with this study, and then finally, areas for improvements with this study, because nothing's perfect and there's always room for improvement. Alright, so the first part of my literature review was looking at a guide to developing quality crash modification factors by the FHWA. So the first question when doing this is, where should I use crash modification factors, and why should I use crash modification factors? And I guess the very first step in that was looking at what exactly is a crash modification factor. So this is a direct quote from this paper, and a crash modification factor is a multiplicative factor used to compute the expected number of crashes after implementing a given countermeasure at a specific site. And then moving on from that, the purposes of these CMFs. There's actually a list of about 5 or 6 purposes, but I just grabbed the purposes for the presentation that directly apply to the project I did. So the purposes that directly apply to what I did are: estimate the safety effects of various countermeasures, compare safety benefits among various alternatives and locations, and then finally identify cost-effective strategies and locations in terms of crash effects. Alright, and for the second bit of my literature review, I looked at NCHRP Report 572 in roundabouts in the United States. So previously there's been a lot of research on roundabouts in Europe because they've been around longer, but now with more and more roundabouts coming to the US, there's a serious need for research, and this tried to cover all aspects of roundabouts in America, and specifically I looked at safety. And this was the source of the roundabout CMF I used in my term project. I tried to go back and do a literature review for all the CMFs I used, but sadly this was the only one where the report was readily available online. And just some quick conclusions from this report is large and highly significant safety benefits of converting signalized and two-way stop controlled intersections to roundabouts, which when I go on to what my study area was, this directly applies because I'm looking at converting a two-way stop to a roundabout, and this quote shows that there is a direct safety benefit, which is good. And then the second thing is there is no apparent relationship between ascribed or center island diameter and safety. This is also relevant because I was actually looking at a mini roundabout. Granted, there might be slight differences in safety in mini roundabouts versus regular roundabouts, and I think that needs to be examined more, but for the sake of this project, I assume that the safety benefits would be the same in a Mindy roundabout versus a regular roundabout. Alright, first to get into a background of where I got the idea for this term project. First off, I work for a consulting firm called RSG, and currently we are working on a planning study for the town of Dover. This is an overall downtown plan including traffic, pedestrian flow, infrastructure, and many aspects. And with this project, we just briefly looked at safety, but just existing condition safety. And now we're looking at the alternatives for the downtown area, but we're not looking at safety at all. And this seems to be a common theme among most consulting projects. I think just the HCS hasn't been around long enough, and there just hasn't been a direct way to look at safety. So what I tried to add to this is add some benefits and costs to these alternatives with safety in mind. So everything I did in this was just building on top of this project with RSG. And below I just have a few quick slides just showing some of the things we did with this project. Alright, so first off, since this university is in Kansas, here's a map I just showed showing where Dover, New Hampshire is in relation to Kansas. And to the right, I've outlined the exact study area. So a brief introduction, downtown Dover is off to the right slightly. And this is a connector road that kind of skips downtown somewhat. And here, down to the bottom, is a cross-section of this road. Currently, it is 2 lanes in either direction, with no turn lanes, no shoulders whatsoever, no on-street parking. And this is honestly a lot more capacity than it needs. It was how it's designed, who knows, 20, 30 years ago, and it's just more capacity than it'll ever need. Alright, and the next thing I have is the crash data from New Hampshire DOT. So I got the crash data from the whole state of New Hampshire and then just grabbed this and made it a new layer in GIS, and here's the quick summary of this. And so between 2003 and 2012, so a 10-year period, there were 35 crashes in total, one of which was fatal, 10 injury, and 24 PDO crashes. And I quickly looked at the equivalent property damage only crashes, just equating the fatal and injuries to that, and came up with 110. And then while looking at my improvement strategies, I broke the crashes into intersection and roadway crashes. So the intersection improvement was up at this intersection here, which I'll look at a couple slides from now. So all these crashes were related to intersection improvement, and then the rest of the crashes I assumed benefited from the roadway improvements. And just, I'll add this again after, but just to add, there are possible inaccuracies in the geocoding. This is just based on knowing this area, driving around a lot, and just seeing how it works. And it shows a large number of crashes here and less crashes here. To be honest, this isn't really a busy intersection. It's not that big. I have a feeling that these crashes were probably spread out over this entire area. But the cops in this area do not have GPS units for locating crashes yet, so this is just in the police narrative. So my guess is it's somewhere in this area, but the location's not perfect. But I think in terms of this project, it's enough data to keep moving forward. Alright, so the intersection improvement I'm looking at, I guess first off, we're looking at improving this crazy intersection. There's a train going through and it's kind of a two-way stop. The east and westbound stop, but as you can tell, there's this crazy pork chop in the middle, and then southbound left, there is no southbound left movement, so it's just a crazy intersection. So what they're looking at doing is installing a mini roundabout. So as you can see in this picture, a mini roundabout is just a smaller version of a regular roundabout with a fully mountable center island. So vehicles, passenger vehicles, treat it as a normal roundabout. They just circulate around the edge. But due to truck turning movements, trucks are not able to do that. So trucks can just go straight over the middle. So it's ideal in tight cities where there isn't room to put a full-size roundabout in. And here's just a quick CAD sketch from RSG of this roundabout. Alright, and the set of roadway improvements I will be looking at is, first, like I mentioned previously, this road has more capacity than it needs. It was designed back, who knows, 30 years ago or so, and they expected a lot more traffic on this road, and it just never happened. So the first improvement is a road diet, so we're reducing 4 through lanes, as in the picture below, to 2 through lanes, as shown in this CAD sketch done by RSG. So as you can see, there will be a slight shoulder, a lane, a nice wide median, and then another lane, and then sometimes parking when it's possible. And additionally, there will be left turn lanes, so this median will be removed where there's a street cutting across, and there will be a left turn lane put in. And then the other thing is there's on-street parking where possible. Not a ton available, there's so much going on this road, but where possible there's been a few spots added. Alright, so moving forward with these improvement strategies, I then went to the crash modification clearinghouse and tried to find countermeasures. And just as a quick summary, all countermeasures that I used were in the HCM, HSM, too used to saying HCM. So they're all from the HSM, so these are the highest quality and have very low standard errors. And I guess also the standard errors are all below 5%, and they're all significant to within at least 1 standard deviation. So none of them float over 1, because sometimes if you have one that's like 0.98 and the standard error is 0.1, then you're not sure if there's going to be improvement, if it's going to make it worse, or it's going to stay the same. But luckily that does not happen with any of these crash modification factors. So below, you can see the 3 countermeasures I looked at. The first is converting the two-way stop-controlled intersection to a roundabout. Granted, it's not a perfect comparison. It's a two-way stop control now, but it's kind of a crazy layout. If anything, it probably has more crashes than a standard two-way stop just because it's such a crazy intersection. But anyway, just for the sake of this project and not having any more data available, I assumed that we use that, which has a CMF of 0.56, which means there's an estimated 44% reduction in the number of crashes, which is great. The next one was the road diet, was converting 4 lanes undivided to 2 lanes plus turning lanes, which is exactly what we're doing. And that reduces all crashes by 29%. And then finally is providing a raised median. And like I said, this is going to be done where possible, where there isn't turn lanes. And this is broken up into injury and non-injury crashes. So providing a raised median reduces injury crashes by 22%, probably because vehicles cannot cross over and have head-on accidents, and just the likelihood of really bad crashes are lowered. And then this actually raises non-injury crashes by 9%. Not entirely sure why, but I'll try to believe the study, and sadly could not find this study to review. But it'd be a good thing to look into in the future. Alright, so with that data, I tried to come up with benefit to cost ratios. So with this, first off, just like what we did in class, I calculated the equivalent uniform annual cost, and then the equivalent uniform annual benefit, and then finally came up with a BC ratio. Obviously, there's more steps in this, which we went over in class, but basically I went through everything in a similar manner to what we did the homework and came up with these numbers. And just quickly, here are some assumptions I came up with. I think pretty similar to what we used in class. And yes. So cost of PDO crashes, about 5,000. AADT growth rate, this is the east. There's not a ton of growth going on. Everything's pretty built out, but just to be conservative, I used 1%. And then an interest rate of 5%. And then assume the lifespan of all these improvements for about 15 years. They'll probably last longer in all honesty, but they'll probably need major renovations and a lot of expensive fixes by that point. So just for the sake of this project, I assumed 15 years. If anything, that's a conservatively low estimate. And then I came up with cost estimates. And so my cost estimates were, to install the mini roundabout was about 50,000. Could be more if there's more landscaping, but just installing the mini roundabout would probably be about 50,000. And then the road diet is only about 20,000 because it's just a simple improvement. It's mostly striping. It's a great thing about road diet is there's not much to change besides just striping the roadway. And then finally, providing a raised median is going to be the most expensive improvement at probably around 100,000. With this, like I said, I came up with the equivalent uniform annual cost for each one, and then benefit. And then, summing this all up, the most important part of all of this is to see if these projects are worthwhile from a safety standpoint. And the conclusion is, overall, yes, they are. So going through, the mini roundabout has a benefit to cost ratio of a little over 2, which is great. And then the road diet has one of over 6, mainly because it is just such a cheap improvement because it involves only striping. And then finally, providing a raised median is only about 0.44. So from a safety standpoint, maybe not completely worth it, but still might be a good investment for the town. So for some conclusions with this, from solely a safety standpoint, these improvements are beneficial. Like I showed before, if you sum up all of these, the total benefit to cost, if it comes in a complete package, is still 1.5. So it's still overall beneficial if you do all this. And that is only from a safety standpoint. There are a lot of other benefits to this. In a downtown area like Dover, having a 2-lane section where people can pass, people can drive fast, and it has like a freeway feel is not the best thing for a town. So tightening this up, adding a median, add at least some shoulder for cyclists. It'll slow traffic down. It'll just make it a nicer downtown overall. So with that, I think my recommendation is they should build this from a safety standpoint. And then, like I just said, there's other aspects that make it even more worth the money. So it seems like a great set of improvements. And then I guess a quick caveat to that is I think the median would be optional, looking at it from a safety standpoint. I think the 2-way left turn lane is the biggest improvement to the roadway. The median's nice to have, but you could just stripe it out. You could continue the 2-way left turn lane through, and I think it's going to have most of the benefit. It's going to slow traffic down. It's going to, I mean, like I showed in this previous slide, it's going to have the biggest bang for your buck improvement. But regardless, the whole package which the town of Dover is looking at is great from a safety standpoint. So I think they should build it. Alright, and just to wrap it up, I just wanted to quickly look at areas that I think I could improve with this project. Just like anything, once you're done and going through it, you realize nothing's perfect, especially in a field like looking at crash analysis. There's so many variables that there's always room for improvement. So the first thing, sorry. I'm just doing a presentation for 1 second.
Yeah.
Alright. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'll be done in 1 second. Alright, CMFs don't apply perfectly to our unique roads intersections. There's funky intersections, there's all sorts of accesses, it's not perfect. But I think they did a fair enough job of looking at this, I think they're close enough to what we're looking at that they can be used, but they're not perfect. And then finally, there's an overlap between road diet and installing a median CMF. There's just a slight overlap. The benefit might not be completely realized as the two combined. And they say use engineering judgment with this. There's no perfect way, but look going forward, this could be examined more. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there's inaccuracies in the geocoding. The cops do not have GPS units, so they just put it in wherever. And with that, it's not going to be perfect. But I think it was accurate enough and got the job done for this project. And then finally, there's also installing the median and axis consolidation and prohibited left turns, which would also lead to safety benefits, but did not look at, and there wasn't a perfect way to apply a CMF to that. Okay, and just wrapping it up, if you have any questions, I'm not entirely sure who's going to be watching this, but if you do have questions, email me at my Kansas State University email address, and I'll be sure to get back to you. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.